Hello, I am coming at you from my kitchen, which is a place I never expected to come to you from. Those of you who I haven't met before, welcome. We talked a little bit on Google Meet, but I am Mrs. Poole and we are doing baking too from home. So remember, if you're not able to make this exact recipe, you can make something else from that same category. I'm going to make crackers today, the cheddar cheese coins, or if you just aren't able to bake at home right now, then you can do those demo notes to go with this. So I'll try to give you tips as you go, and then just remember that you can always look up some too, because most of the time, there's some other variation of the recipe out there. So like I said, I'm gonna make cheddar cheese coins. I just have my recipe right here. There's also some variations. If you like buffalo, there's a really good buffalo blue cheese at the bottom of yours. It has blue cheese, of course, and cayenne. And then there's the everything bagel seasoning. If you haven't tried that yet, it's really, really good. It's got the poppy seeds and the sesame seeds and garlic and onion in it. It's really good on eggs too. The mustard, I love mustard, and it has Gruyere and caraway seeds, and then the pimento. And pimento, if you've ever had, maybe you have family members from the South or something, the pimento cheese is really good on those crackers too, but it's just kind of imitating those. So like I said, coming to you from home, making cheddar cheese coins. If you don't have a digital scale at home, you can look up very quickly, you can look up the weight measurements back and forth on those. So it is really handy to have a digital scale at home for lots of reasons though. So I have one. I think mine cost maybe $10 on Amazon. I'm not sure what shipping is like these days, but it was pretty cheap and it's been useful for a whole lot of things. And then of course it's fun for little science experiments for my kids. So we're going to start with cheese. So I've got 4 ounces of cheddar cheese. Now remember, we're kind of quarantine cooking here. So if you need to use something that is, a different kind of cheese, you could use that. On this one, I would suggest a cheese of some sort in there, but that will work there. Then we're going to have 3 3/4 ounce of all-purpose flour. Remember, all-purpose flour is the all-purpose stuff, so it's that middle of the road protein and gluten level, so we'll create some structure here with this. If you are gluten-free, I haven't tried it with something like almond flour, but you might give it a try and let us know. I mean, now's the time, right? And then I don't have a million little Mies cups at my house, so sometimes, I'm borrowing my kids' little bowls already, and then I just have my Mies for these ingredients set up all together in one of these. So this is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne, 1/8 of a teaspoon of paprika, and then the cornstarch, which is 1.5 teaspoons of cornstarch. So cornstarch is that, of course, starch, but it's like a thickener also. Remember, it kind of helps things come together. And then the others are for flavor, and then remember, salt brings out the flavor of other things. And then I've got water here, about 1.5 tablespoons, and then I have 2 ounces of butter, and I do want to keep this cold. Remember when you made pie crusts in baking one, you kept your butter really cold? We want to do that here too. And it calls for this to be cut into cubes and chilled. So just make sure that it's cold. You don't let it sit out and soften like we're going to do for our sugar cookies that we're going to make this week. Not sure what order you're watching this in. But this is just going to be cut. I like to cut it one way, this way, and then turn it and cut it this way, and then turn it this way, and then I get these perfect little cubes out of it. Right, so then they're cubed. And then if I were gonna do this earlier, then I would just put this in the refrigerator while I'm measuring my other ingredients. Okay, I don't have a great food processor at home. I use this instead. This is a Ninja. That is a blender / food processor. They're pretty reasonable price compared to lots of other things too, so I like it for that. I'm going to use my cheese. This is a pretty easy recipe, and this is a really, really, really good snack. So if you're wishing you had like a crunchy, salty snack and you haven't been to the grocery store in a while like I haven't, then this will fill that craving for probably your whole family. So I'm going to take my dry ingredients, basically everything but the water right now, and I'm going to process it. I usually process things on pulse. Your recipe says about 30 seconds. Really, we're just looking for it to get mixed up, so You know, your recipe says 30 seconds, but not that big of a deal. You just want it to be, you know, mixed together. So that's sufficiently mixed. And then I'm gonna toss the butter in. And now remember, butter is going to help with flavor, of course, and also with texture. So I did this, and it is pretty ground up. This is like a mealy pie dough, basically, is what this would be. So I am going to, it says your recipe says till it resembles kind of like sand. So yes, that would resemble sand. We're not trying to make it flaky like we would for a pie crust here, okay? And then I'm gonna add in my water. It's not much water, but it's usually enough. And if it's not enough, you can add more. It's really hard to take out after you've added it already. Pardon me. So, as mentioned before, this is not, you know, the top of the line food processor like we have at school. So sometimes, excuse me, sometimes I have to do this, and then sometimes I've got to add a little bit more water. So I'm looking at this, and this doesn't look like it's really going to stick together, right? But I always want to check. So I'm going to take my hand and press it together and see, and that is almost together. See, that butter is just going to kind of help me press that together. That's really almost together. So I'm just going to get a splash more water. I just got it straight from my sink. A splash more of water because I really don't want it to be sticky. And I'm going to do this. Oh, you can't see me. I'm going to do this and just stir it up. And then what usually works just fine, just great, is dump this out straight there on my countertop, or into a bowl if you prefer. You know, if your parents are going to walk by and be like, what are you doing? Then maybe you should put it in a bowl. And then I am going to not knead this because I don't want it to get tough, but I'm just going to push it together, you know, enough so that it comes together. Remember that butter is going to kind of melt with my hand heat here. So I just want to push it until it comes together. And then I'm going to get some plastic wrap. And these are like icebox cookies, basically. So if you've had those, you know, slice and bake cookies at the grocery store before, this is basically what you're making here. Okay, so I have my plastic wrap. And I'm going to cut a piece of that. Oh, plastic wrap. If you're doing this at home with me, you're probably like, yeah, oh, plastic wrap. Oh, plastic wrap. Okay, and then we want to get about a 10-inch log here, because then we will refrigerate these, and then we will cut them. You can really impress people when you say you make your own crackers, and then you discover that they're really not that hard. So then what I do is stick them in here at this point, and then I think it's easier to roll them out. You know, they kind of stay together better for me if I roll them out once they're already in the plastic wrap. And then I pretty much am not that great in making a circle. So mine turn out to be kind of more of a square, or almost like that shape. So that's great. This is what my log looks like. This is going to go into the refrigerator. I'm going to refrigerate it for at least an hour, but you can make these ahead of time, but you'll probably want to eat them. So refrigerate them for at least an hour, and then I'll come back later and I will show you how we will just cut and bake, and then they're ready. See you in a bit. Hi, we've let this chill. I wound up letting mine chill overnight because now we're ready to eat them. So I have my oven on 350, and this is really nice and firm now, so it's not crumbly like it was. Because remember, we had that butter that will soften up as we had it out at room temperature, even though we used it cold. So now it's nice and firm. So I'm gonna set this on a cutting board. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees, and then I just have a half sheet pan, and I lined mine with this silicone baking mat I like to use. I have the Amazon brand, and I have the real brand, and I have, I don't know what this is, but I have that Silpat brand too, and they all work great. You could use parchment paper, or if you had to, you can just spray it. You just like to have it lined with something so that it doesn't stick. This is pretty much high enough in fat that you wouldn't have to worry about it sticking, kind of like biscuits. but I do like to line it on this recipe. So then I'm just gonna cut these, and like they're called coins, I'm just cutting them into about a 1/4 inch thick pieces, little discs, and they are not going to, you know, puff up a ton. They're not going to expand like a cookie might when it's baking, so I'm not worried about that. So I can put them pretty close together, and I'm just going to cut these like I told you previously. Mine almost looks like a loaf of bread in shape. They'll taste just the same. They'll taste really great. I'm sure my family will have these gone today. I don't know about you guys, but it seems like this whole stay at home has us going through a lot more snacks than usual, with a couple kids at home especially. So these are all just gonna go on here. You could just cut them like this too, and then, you know, transfer them. I'm just using a little paring knife that I have. I'm sure none of you are surprised, if you know me, to see that I have a purple cutting board at home. If you haven't been in the baking room in the MCA or in the culinary room, the only color we really have in there is purple mixers. Awesome K-State purple mixers. So now I have all these cut, and I can just line them up here on the pan. These will bake for about 20 minutes. I will rotate the pan halfway through just to make sure that they're baking evenly, but I can fit all these on one pan. If you only have smaller pans, put them on 2 pans, and then, you know, like this in your oven, and switch them at about 10 minutes up and down, and then turn them around. If your oven's older, sometimes the older ovens especially don't heat so evenly, so you might need to do that, or sometimes the new ones, depending on how they're made. So if you know your oven doesn't heat too evenly, then you're probably going to want to move yours either like this, or turning around, so the front to the back, back to the front, about halfway through, so that they're all the nice same golden brown. But I'm going to toss these in the oven, like I said, for about 20 minutes, and then I'll know they're done when they're a little bit golden brown on the edges, and then I will let them sit out for a little bit too. They'll finish firming up, just like cookies do when you bake them. They'll finish firming up, and then they'll be a nice kind of crunchy cookie. If you want them to be crunchier, cut them thinner. If you want them to be a little bit chewier in the middle, which I actually like that, I cut them a little bit thicker if I want them to be a little chewy in the middle. So that's it, and then you'll have some homemade cheese crackers, which you probably never thought about making homemade crackers.